Can we give a round of applause to Mark Greene, who's joined us tonight, please? Come on down, Mark. Now, I do hope you're not disappointed with Mark.
Yeah, me too.
in the sense that I have since discovered, doing my research, that there is a even more famous Mark Greene than yourself, Mark.
There is.
Some ER guy.
A good-looking American doctor who dies of cancer that everybody loved in ER.
Yes,
in ER. Yeah, very good.
Not to be confused with yourself, your good self, Mark.
No.
We're very pleased to have you all the way from London today, so thank you.
Hello.
Mark, we're going to delve into your life. We're going to dig deep. You excited about that prospect?
Not at all.
No, I know. You love talking about yourself. But you're going to talk about work as well, and that is something you're very, very passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to talk a little bit about just really how you've seen the Bible talks about work, and I think that's amazing. And we're going to dig into some of that, and your journey really to faith as well. So I want to almost start there. But just tell us first who exactly you are. Like, so what do you do now? Where have you come from? And that sort of thing. A little background.
What do I do now? I work for an organisation called the London Institute for Contemporary Christianity, an impossibly long title. And basically what we're really interested in is helping all God's people see how indeed they can be fruitful for God, whatever they do. Whether they're at home with 19 children under 7, whether they're a student, whether they're a plumber, whether they're running a company, whether they're retired, whether they're at home caring for somebody, that God is there, that he's interested in what we do, and that it is as significant in his eyes as being a leader of Junction 1 Church or being an overseas missionary or anything like that. And so you might think that there was no need to make the case that whatever we do might be significant to God, but actually there is. And many people feel like second-class citizens in the kingdom of God. But that ain't the truth, so we may come to that. Okay. So I work for them, been doing that for 25 years now.
Did you start the organisation? Was it something that came out of your brain, Mark?
No, it came out of the brain of a much more famous human. Mm-hmm. And if you Googled his name, he would be the first person to find under his name. Is a man called John Stott, who was one of the great Bible teachers of the 20th century, very good friend of Billy Graham, and he basically changed the Protestant church globally. And he only founded 2 organizations. One was ours, which was very small. And when I took it over, there were 3.5 people working for it. Wow. And it was very tiny, struggling. And now we've got about 25. So it's a different kind of organization than it was.
Yeah. But you've got family, you kind of...
I do. I'm the husband of one wife.
Good. We like that. Yes.
At least I haven't checked my texts. And we have 3 children. My wife is from Finland. And we met actually at Bible college. I married at, relatively speaking, an advanced age. I didn't think I was ever going to get married. And she has no memory of meeting me the first time we met. It's very, very sad. And we have 3 children, 32, 29, 27. Yeah.
Fantastic. But let's step back to sort of your earlier days. So you were at university, you were Jewish background.
Jewish background, yeah.
And maybe we're joking about it, but you almost had no faith in a way, did you? Because your Jewishness was there. Was it? Tell us about how that was and how you journeyed to faith. How did you find Jesus?
Well, growing up Jewish in North London, there's plenty of other Jewish people there, but you also, I was going to Christian schools, as it were, and always had a kind of interest in God. I'm not sure really where that came from because the family were not religious Jews, cultural Jews. Really significant from a family point of view. Friday night, every Friday night, the wine, the family together. My parents would never go out on Friday night except with the kids, if you like. And I can remember a joyous evening when my parents actually went out on Friday night without us. And I, at 10 years old, was in the driveway screaming at them with self-righteousness, how dare you leave me at home to go to this terrible event you're going to, and so on and so forth. A marvellous moment for a child to be able to make his parents feel thoroughly guilty. And I still remember my mother's expression on her face. She felt so guilty. Anyway, so it was cultural really, but it's a very strong family culture, very strong food culture. very beautiful in many ways. And from somewhere I had a kind of yen for God. I remember at school I got the part of Jesus in one play when I was about 17.
17. Did you have to have a beard?
No, I didn't. I certainly was nowhere near having a beard.
Yes.
No, I just think the nose was all. And the following year I got the part of God.
So it was all happening.
Nowhere to go after that. And and they even let me lead a service, and I was not a Christian. I don't know why they did that. But one thing I do remember of my school days was I had a particularly good friend, and he wanted to study John's Gospel with the assistant chaplain. And for some reason I went with him, I think just out of interest in texts. And he was a young chaplain. He was about 25, 26, maybe 27. I remember my friend asking him, this was a particularly germane issue for my friend. He asked him, basically, do you believe in sex after marriage?
Before marriage or after marriage?
I think after marriage, I think. I mean, before marriage. Sex after marriage is probably a good idea at some point, if you must.
You heard it here first, everybody, okay? You heard it here first.
Yeah, there's my first Freudian slip. Anyway, sex before marriage. And I remember this because this was a boys' school. So, and I remember this chaplain, youngish man, basically saying, yes, I do. I think that it's not God's perfect will for people to have sex before marriage. And he then said, and I expect my wedding night to be the most embarrassing evening of my life, and so on and so on. And then he went bright red, and I thought, that's a man of courage and conviction. He is being vulnerable before two 17-year-old boys who could potentially do all kinds of things with that information. And he has trusted us, but he's also told us the truth. And I think I've always been impressed by people who are prepared to tell the truth as they see it, at some personal cost. And I think that made an impression on me. Yeah.
So how did you actually become a Christian then? What was your...
Well,
did you have a set
when
moment?
I left school, I left school, I spent a year in Israel. I was due to go up to university, and I did study modern languages. Ended up doing Arabic and Hebrew, having done French and German, and then ended up just doing Hebrew, not for religious reasons. And I think at uni, as happens, I was a target, I think, for a long time of Christians. And then I was color-coded in the end as, you can talk to him, but you won't get anywhere. So, I loved the debate, but I wasn't really...
You didn't want it to impact your life.
Didn't want it to impact my life.
You kind of wanted your own life, was it? Yeah.
And but in my last month, I'd broken up with my girlfriend, and I got a back injury, so I couldn't play sport at the time. And this guy came to talk to me, and he wasn't a debater. So suddenly the conversation became real, as opposed to something about ideas. And one day he asked me if I would like to become a Christian. And he said, well, let's pray this. And I said, yes, and let's pray this prayer. And for a couple of years after that, I would tell people that what happened was that I had considered the claims of Jesus and the historical evidence and so on and so forth, and I had decided that it was true, and therefore I had given my life to Jesus. That is not what happened. That is not at all what happened. That is what happens to some people. But that's not what happened to me. What happened to me was there was a presence in the room that was beyond merely the mental, and I felt drawn into Jesus as the answer. What is the question? Not entirely sure. And it was a moment of surrender, honestly, almost like an embrace, almost like allowing yourself to be held. And something happened to me in that room. And I guess the language is, biblical language would be, I was born again, I was created anew, something happened. And my life did begin to change. I mean, a year later, I did pick up the orthodox, this is what you're meant to believe. Do you believe it?
That's not the reality of a relationship with God, is it?
No.
The reality is encounter.
It was an encounter.
And that's what you had.
That's what I had.
You know, you can have it in your head, but actually what you had was the real encounter of God and knowing him. Amazing. Yeah. And that changed your life.
It did.
Life wasn't the same. Tell us about how you went on from uni then, and how you were a new Christian, you were stepping out into the workplace. I guess there's a lot of potential to fall away maybe. You went into advertising, which some people might say would be very scary, kind of secular world. Tell us about your journey and understanding in that world.
Well, first of all, I wasn't very comfortable with church. But one of the things that happened to me was the person who helped me to come to Jesus met with me every week on my own, one-on-one, for a year pretty much. And then he invited me to join a small Bible study with 4 people who were engineers. And no greater testimony of God's ability to change someone is for an art student to spend one evening a week for 2 years with engineers.
It sounds absolute torture to me, Mark. Trust me, it's torture.
And, the fact is that when you become a Christian, there is a deeper bond than all those other things that used to be, art students don't spend time with engineers, usually because engineers at uni are working so hard. They've got.
And you were just relaxing in bed in the morning.
Yeah, just reading books and having
3 hours a week.
You're quite. So I was. The Bible word is discipled. Somebody was taking an interest in me and helping me learn and addressing the issues that I had as I was having them, as opposed to going into some program. And that was an incredible gift.
Wow.
And then when I was transferred to New York, and then I found someone else who did that for me for 7 years. He was a lawyer. But I was also, at that point, I became part of a church. Okay. And that was, it was an extraordinary community. Yeah. Small, but an extraordinary community.
Amazing. So you're growing in your faith. You're now working in New York, at that point, wasn't it? And did you have opportunities there to share your faith with people? How did that look? And did you see some amazing things happening in that time?
Yes. Would you like me to?
I would. That's my nice little cue there, Mark, for you to kind of,
tell some stories.
Give us a story.
Well, I'll tell you this. I did see amazing things.
We don't want to hear about the girlfriend, by the way, because I believe there was a girl involved, wasn't there? No?
There might have been a girl involved. Yeah. I saw amazing things happen, really. Over time, I saw God heal someone on the 10th floor of a Madison Avenue advertising agency, definitively healed, in the middle of the day. I saw him do that more than once. I saw him answer prayer on prayer. I saw him, with probably the most difficult client that we had at the time, and we'd made a mistake, and it could have gone very, very badly. And, I was praying, and the person who had come to Christ, who was working for me, she'd come to Christ, praying like mad, and the client reacted in a way that nobody could believe. Yeah. Completely out of character. Actually, entirely reasonable, but completely out of character to what we were expecting. Yeah. And so I saw God work in all kinds of ways. There was growing me in character. You at work, you learn from the people around you. God uses wherever you are to disciple you. You're not just taught by people in church. You're taught by your bosses. You're taught by your colleagues. You grow in humility, perhaps, and so on. So yes, and I did see some people. My boss became a Christian, and the woman working below me became a Christian, and we did a number of things. But I don't want to make it sound like every week something was, I mean, I kept a journal through all that time, and I have to say that virtually every day there was some kind of answer to prayer. But that didn't mean that every day somebody was becoming a Christian.
Yeah.
But one of the things is about advertising is, I don't know what any of your jobs are, but different jobs have different dynamics. And therefore they have different opportunities. And one of the things is, with advertising is you spend a lot of time with people traveling, going to see clients, coming back from clients, and so on and so forth. And advertising is very simple. In the end, you have to talk about something else. So you get to know people quite well. Other jobs, it takes a long time to have those kind of conversations with people. It's also often a youngish for quite a long time. So quite a lot of people are single in it. So they're not rushing home to 3 children at 6:30 or 5:30. You know, you can go out. So it's quite social. So I don't want to make a principle of those dynamics for anybody else. You know, if you're a plumber, the dynamics are very different. You build trust with a family over years. My plumber became a Christian, not through me, becomes a Christian. And, I mean, his example on how he cares for his clients, how he's been trusted by them, and how therefore he has opportunities completely different from the way I do. But so we all have to take our opportunities. I don't want to exaggerate. I don't want anybody to hear, gosh, there are all these opportunities, and why isn't that like that for me? No, God has put us in different places to make the most of those places. But it was very fruitful.
And actually, Mark, that leads us on really to, you've written lots of books, and one of the books you've written, I know, is called Fruitfulness on the Front Line, is it? And
yeah.
The whole idea about how, unpack that for us. What do you see as the front line, and what do you see as fruitfulness for people? And I think one of the interesting things I think listening to you is how you have seen that often we haven't really understood in church and in the Christian life how important what we do every day is, and how God is interested in the everyday for everybody. So tell us about your journey in that thinking and where that came and what you'd encourage people with.
Well, it was an accident how the material came about. It's now been used by over 200,000 people and continues to be used. This morning I was listening to a testimony from a Nigerian who's training or has trained 70,000 doctors in Nigeria who's used this material. So you never know where. I tell you that because something that starts very small as an accident, literally an accident, ends up being somewhere that you can't particularly imagine. So I was invited to go to a place called Scotland, which is north of Liverpool. Okay. And to work with 10 people in their late 20s, early 30s over a 2-year period. Go up once every 3 months, 2 days each time. And these are people doing a variety of things. One was a housewife, one was a graphic designer, one was a banker, one was an actress, one was a teacher, one was a head teacher, one was a doctor. I mean, a whole range of jobs, really. One was in retail, selling jewelry. And they've been hand-picked as really godly people who wanted to make an impact in the workplace. And what we noticed was none of them thought they were having any impact. They were really keen to. None of them thought they were having any impact. So, one of them had turned round 2 failing schools in a deprived area of Glasgow by the age of 34, wow. This woman. Extraordinary. She'd impacted the lives of hundreds of children, their families, their carers, their guardians, and all this kind of stuff. And she thinks this is irrelevant to God. How could that be? And what we realized was that what they thought was fruitfulness was a very narrow thing. For very many Christians, fruitfulness might be defined as serving in church, which is a good thing to do, helping the poor in some way, taking a neighbor, a meal, helping out with a homeless charity, all kinds of things that loads and loads of churches do really well and loads of individuals do well, or having a conversation about Jesus. And you get a lot of points in the Christian world for having a conversation about Jesus, because we are meant to talk about him, because he's the center of our life and can make a difference to anybody's life, really, positively. So, good thing to do. But the problem is, on an average day for most people, you don't get an opportunity to do that. It's not what happens every day. So it may not happen every week with the people that you're with. So are you a failure? Are you completely unfruitful? Are you a rubbish Christian? And we realized that actually people couldn't see all the ways that God was working through them. So we came up with a framework, and it has 6 M's. I'll tell you what they are, and then I'll give you just one example of somebody in a job that you'd all be familiar with. Gonna have to talk louder and louder.
I know. I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Can you all hear okay?
I can hear the rain.
Can you hear? Okay.
So the 6 are modeling godly character. In other words, living in ways that show love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, those sorts of things. Making good work, ministering grace and love, molding a culture, I'll come to that. Being a mouthpiece for truth and justice and a messenger for the gospel. So I don't know if anybody here has ever worked as a barista or served in a restaurant. I know we have an outstanding pastry chef here, but you've probably all been to a coffee shop. So anyway, if you're a barista, how do you get to model godly character? Well, it's Monday morning, the rain is coming down, but the queue is outside the door, and you've got to show peace. How are you going to be calm when you've got to really load, the pressure is on? And you've got to show patience, because the person in front of you cannot make up their mind whether they want a macchiato or a skinny latte with chocolate sprinkles and hazelnut syrup.
Oh,
or
that
maybe
sounds
even
nice.
that sounds nice, doesn't it? But would it be better with vanilla syrup?
Okay.
I mean, that's the question.
Oh, right,
I
okay.
can't make up my mind. Get on with it.
Yeah.
And they do good work for God when they make the coffee, when they get that espresso shot in the steam milk within 10 seconds. Apparently the chemistry makes a bit of a difference. So they're making good work, and they're doing it when they ask God to help them with it, and then that's something he's interested in. Ministering grace and love, how do you do that? Well, whether you're serving at church perhaps or serving in a coffee shop, you can't actually have a long conversation with everybody, can you? Because you've got a queue. And it's more than writing somebody's name on the cup, isn't it? But you look and you think, Raphael really needs some encouragement today. I can see that there's something up. So I'm going to spend 20 seconds talking to Raphael, more than I would do. And when I go clear the tables, I'm thinking, who do I spend a minute talking to, and so on. You're ministering grace and love. You're molding a culture. We've all been to a coffee shop where the person there is pleased to see you and who kind of remembers your name and remembers that you actually always have chocolate sprinkles with vanilla or whatever it might be. And they lift you, because actually really serving coffee in a coffee shop is about creating hospitality and warmth and welcome, isn't it? And that makes a difference. You mold the culture. On the other hand, there's the people that you walk in and you think, oh dear, it's the freezer. And it completely changes the atmosphere. You mold a culture that way at home. You put a little tea light candle on the table on Friday evening. The weekend begins here. Change the culture. Every family has a culture and so on. And being a mouthpiece for truth and justice as a barista, well, what has that got to do with it? Well, justice. You've asked, perhaps you're a Christian, and you've asked, well, I'd like not to work on too many Sunday shifts because I want to go to Junction 1 as often as I can. And so the manager said, that's fine. And then you notice that Natalie has got 3 Sundays in a row. Well, that's not fair. I'll take hers. I'll take one of those. So you see the problem. And telling the truth is stopping gossip. It's as simple as that. We've all been at a school gate, and there's gossip, and you're thinking, that is not the way that teacher really is. That's not true. We've all been in a team where a narrative builds up around a person, and you're thinking, and everyone's thinking, and it becomes the way we talk around here about a person. And you're thinking, it's not entirely true. Speaking up for truth and justice. And then there's being a messenger for the gospel. And the thing, there is a book available here this evening. There's only 3 copies here this evening. But it is available, called Fruitfulness on the Front Line, and you can read about it online. The thing about those 6 M's, that's only 5. The thing about those 6 M's is that you get to do 5 of those every day. Every day you're going to model godly character, or not. You're either going to lose your temper with somebody, or you're going to show patience. You're either going to be kind, or you're not going to be kind. Every day you have the opportunity to do something for God. Anything you do, you can do for God, in a way that will give him pleasure. You pick up the towel in the gym. You put the divot back on the fairway, or whatever it might be. You just turn the label right the right way round on the soup shelf in the supermarket. Just do it well for God. Every day you get to minister grace and love. I remember one woman, she was confined to home, a Glaswegian woman, quite young at the time, and she was suffering from a degenerative disease. And she said to God, how can I minister to people now that I'm confined? Who can I bless? Whose day can I lift? And she realized that she could bless the Tesco delivery drivers who came with her groceries. Every little helps. And so that's what she did.
I can see why you're in advertising, Mark.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Nice slogan there.
Yeah, not one of mine, unfortunately. I would be a lot richer if I come up with that one.
You would.
And so it goes on. So you see the idea. Probably today, if you're a follower of Jesus, you've been fruitful in an amazing number of ways, but you haven't seen it. And when you don't see it, actually it's not to make people feel proud, but it's to recognize what God is doing in people's lives, in our lives, and in one another's lives. Often we can't see it. It's like dolphins don't know they're good at swimming. Lots of people, and you probably know, if you know people here, you probably go up to somebody at the end of this and say, I've always appreciated this about you, but I'm so British that I've never told you. If you're Italian, you've probably told them.
Yeah, I did. Mark, you've also written books on lots of different things, but you've written one about the Queen, and I'm just going to briefly tap into that because I think all that you've just described there, in a sense, is how you picture what the Queen was and did in her time that she reigned. So tell us about the book you wrote on the Queen, and you were very privileged that she actually wrote the introduction, the
forward,
tribute,
yeah.
wasn't it? The forward.
It's the only book she's ever written. She ever wrote a forward for was this book called The Servant Queen and the King She Serves. And the way it came about was another accident. So I'd written Fruitfulness on the front line, and most of my stories are about what you would call, folk doing things. And for some reason I said to God, I wonder, is there somebody in the public eye, where this is going now, who actually models these 6 things? And almost immediately this came to me, and it came with weight, the Queen. Now you need to know that I was not a Queen watcher. I had not a single book about the Queen, or pamphlet, or picture of the Queen in my house. The only thing I had of the Queen was a Jubilee paperweight, glass paperweight from the Silver Jubilee. That's the only thing I had. So I didn't really know. And I began thinking, I thought, this is true. This could be true. Oh my goodness. The Queen, the most photographed, the most famous woman in the world, is an outstanding disciple of Jesus. That's what God told me. And then I checked it out, just to make sure he was right. And everywhere I talk to people who know her. They won't tell you stories usually, but they will tell you whether you're right or wrong. And I did get a lot of stories as well. And then I began to look at her Christmas addresses, which she wrote herself. Other people might add a word or two, but basically she wrote them herself, whereas most of her other speeches, of course, are written by other people. So these are her words that she chose. And I was flabbergasted. I thought, this isn't just somebody talking about Jesus as an idea. This is somebody who knows him. He's my anchor. He's the person who guides me. The language was so personal and sometimes quite original. I realized it's real. So then we decided we wanted to get this message out, and she agreed to write the forward, and we produced a picture book, and which was for charity, which is one of the reasons why she agreed to do the forward, and sold 1 million copies for charity, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd be driving a Lamborghini up the M6. But 1 million copies is a lot. And I suppose one of the most sweet things, because she trusted us, she didn't read any of the copy beforehand, she just trusted us, was she went to Leicester Cathedral, and they had a service for her, and the dean had bought 3,000 copies to give a copy to everybody who came. And she said to the dean, "I'm so glad they're giving out my book." And the fact is, it really was her book, even though I'd written it, because the main thing was her words. And then I wrote one after her death, which we have here, Life of Grace, and so on, yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. And in a moment you're going to recite one of your poems for us. Our title tonight has been Good Things Still Happen. And I often think Christmas is a time when actually a lot of us really do enjoy it, and it's a good time. But I think maybe as you read the poem and you talk about it, it's what is the deepness behind Christmas? What's the deep message of Christmas? And I think it comes through in one of your poems, doesn't it, that you're reading now? So feel free to go ahead with that, and then tell us about the poems and what they mean to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I began writing these a while back, and one a year for Christmas. And we used to produce Christmas cards because we found it difficult to find contemporary cards that we felt happy sharing with people who might not welcome what you might call a traditional Christmas card. Lots of people like them, but other people don't, and we didn't want to send people snowmen or anything like that. So, and we decided just as an extra little bit to put a poem in. Some people like poems, some people don't. So this was one of the early ones, and it's been much performed in Christmas carol services and stuff, usually by a woman, usually somewhere between the age of 14 and 21. So this is definitely not me. And it's about Mary. And I've always been, in a way, amazed by Mary, because there she is. She's a teenage girl, certainly, and she's asked by God to do something really, really, in some ways, extraordinary, to bear the Son of God, yes, but the consequences of that, I mean, it's tough to be, in a Jewish society at that time, to be pregnant before marriage. That is not a good place to be. That would dishonor your family. Your fiancé would almost certainly not marry you, and you would carry a stigma with you for the rest of your life. And so when God asks her to carry his child, if you like, the Son of God, and she's not yet married, although she's betrothed, there's a lot at stake for her. And although, obviously, that sounds spectacular, I think for many people there is something at stake when they choose to follow Jesus. You can be part of a friendship group and other people will go, have you gone nuts? You could be from a Hindu family or a Muslim family and people might say, we don't want to know you anymore, or there could be a risk to your life in some contexts, or some of your friends might disown you. I mean, there are risks for people as they make that, and she makes her decision. So this is a little exploration of that, recognizing that at some level she could have said no. And it's called The Offer. The offer. It was an offer she could have refused, a life she could have used in some other way, to grow great with child, for example, after her wedding day, to forego the knowing looks and the slur of slut, to defer to another the chance to tell a father and watch the word twist in her fiancé's gut, to make room for some noble's daughter to carry the cause of innocence slaughter, to allow some other to cradle a son pale from his pinioned death. She could have said, all things considered, and though I am flattered, I would rather not. I'm just a village girl, not fit for such matters. Of course, there was the sigh of angels' wings, the words with all his promises ripened for now, the chance to do something extraordinary, to let what was ordinary become, but afterwards, would it not seem such girlish fancy? She, turning from the safety of merely human possibility, marveling at how could it be that he should choose her to bless, welcomed truth to her womb and said, yes.
Wow, I think that's a moment of applause, isn't it? Thank you. It's an interesting thought, yes, isn't it? Do you look back over your Christian life, Mark, and you had a moment when you said yes to Jesus? You've been a Christian for a good number of years. You've chosen to follow him. What would you say are your reflections on those many years now of being a Christian? What would you say? Well, perhaps what you say to someone, maybe someone here tonight who hasn't taken that step yet, maybe hasn't said yes. What would you say to someone in that position who's saying, I see the offer, I understand the offer, but is it worth saying yes?
I've been reflecting on this recently a little bit, partly because my eldest son is 32. He really loves Jesus, and he's been ill one way and another for 12 years. He's had long COVID now for 2 years, and he has a lot of naps a day. He's had to give up his job. He's come home to live with us, and his trust in Jesus is amazing to me, and we as a family carry that, and I reflect, has Jesus kept his promises? Has he been with us in that painful period? Has he upheld us during that time? And I'm sure for some of you, you've had much harder things in your life, but for us the question is, has he upheld us? Has he been with us? Is the way that he has been kind in those circumstances, is the hope that we have strong enough to give us joy in the weariness sometimes, joy in the confusion sometimes, a sense of purposefulness when actually this looks futile, but is it futile? No. And the answer to all those questions has been not easily won necessarily, but yes, yes, and yes. And I think what I have carried with me since about 7 years after becoming a Christian, when Jesus met with me again in another profound way, is just a sense of deep security and a sense of being deeply loved, come what may. And has it been worth it? When I think of the way that I was going, moderately successful person at arguably the best university in the world, about to go into the 4th best advertising agency in the world, biggest, and the one with the highest reputation for integrity, believe it or not. You know, that looks good. How might I have gone, not because of advertising, but how might I have gone because of who I was? I think, well, thank God for that. Thank God for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Going to open up for questions. I wonder if anybody would like to ask Mark a question about anything, but particularly anything maybe he said tonight. Matthew. I'll just echo that. So what was the reaction from people, your family, from the Jewish background to becoming a Christian?
Actually, extraordinarily, to begin with, very, very okay. And I was so bad at it, being a Christian, that when I went to New York and my Christian friends were very worried about going to Babylon on the Hudson, as it were, corrupt New York in the 80s was a pretty decadent place. And my Christian friends began to think, if he goes there, that's the end of him. I did go to my father and said, I'm having second thoughts. And he said, why? And I said, well, my Christian friends are very worried about, that I will, backslide and, and so on and so forth. And he said, "Oh, I didn't know your faith was so important to you." So I wasn't doing a very good job with my family at that point. It was my brother who was adopted, who had, like me, gone to Israel, spent a year there, and he'd come back from Israel because he was adopted, was thinking of formally converting to Judaism. And he had he was quite upset, he was quite saddened. I mean, not in a bitter way, but upset. And but within 4 years, he had become a Christian through a community in Newport. The Welsh saved him. But yeah, that was the only, there are some people it's very, very difficult for, but it wasn't for me.
Okay, thank you. Was there another question, Andy? Yeah, thank you. So hearing a little bit about the miracles in New York.
Okay. Well, the background to this is that when I had a bad back injury, my father had a patient, a man called Leonard Serlin, who had a gift of healing. And I was healed by him, but he wasn't a Christian. But it was real. I mean, the guy had, he made his money in kitchen furniture, as it happened, so he didn't need the money. He wasn't doing it for the money, but he discovered that he had this gift, and he documented every one of the healings he had, medically. Where are you now? What do the doctors say? And then let's see what happens. And so I believed that there was a power to do this. And I became interested in it. And the person discipling me said, "You've got to be very careful of this stuff," rightly so. You don't necessarily know where it's coming from, rightly so. And in America, there'd been quite a lot of abuse of that, not just in America. So I basically read that through every incidence of healing in the Bible and studied it and read some books by what you might call some Orthodox people, and I began to pray for people. And on one occasion, God woke me up in the morning and asked me to go and pray for somebody who I did not want to be in the same room as, because she was convinced I was going to marry her. And I was convinced I wasn't. And it was really difficult. She was in the same church, a wonderful person, but this was very visceral for me. She was convinced, much older Christian, which made it worse. Not older in age, but older Christian. So she's probably heard from God, but no! Please. And she'd had a condition that the doctors couldn't fix. She'd been in hospital, a lung condition, and it didn't. And the Lord said, "Go and pray for her." So I prayed for her in the room. There was a presence of God in the room, and it came off her lungs. She felt it almost lift off her lungs. And she went and then had that checked, and she was well. And then my first incident in the advertising agency was that my boss's secretary had wisdom tooth operation, and she came back, and she was in absolute agony. The painkillers were not working at all. So I invited her into my office, and I asked her name was Sheila Lieber. She was a Jewish woman, older than me. And I said, "Would you mind if I prayed for you?" And she said, "Please do." She was in agony. And just went away. Instantly, just disappeared. And the other one I cannot prove in terms of, but my boss, a different boss, called Mel, who's a slightly different stage, but she was on a business trip, and she'd gone running, and she'd fallen over and shattered a bone, and the X-ray had shown splinters. Had splintered, there'd been splinters inside, so they were going to have to do surgery to get the splinters out. And for some reason, I prayed that those splinters would go away. And the next thing we heard was that the following day, they'd taken another X-ray. Apparently, maybe that's standard procedure before an operation. What's the exact status of things now? and there were no splinters. Now, I cannot prove that they didn't mess up the first x-ray. I can't prove that, because I don't know. But she didn't have to have the operation. And the reality is that I could tell you miracle stories, not just of healing, but of other people. Can I tell one story? I love this story.
You're allowed one more, Mark.
Okay, this is because I want to say that God does miraculous things like he used to do, not just in those sorts of situations, but in situations of kind of normality out in the world of work and so on and so forth. So here is one. This is a story of a woman who's the night manager in a hotel. I don't know if anybody's ever worked in a hotel. Anybody worked in a hotel? But if you've ever seen the night manager, you'll know night managers. Have you worked in a hotel? Night managers are. It's a different. It's in some ways easy, in some ways tough. When something goes wrong, there's not very many other people around. So if the computers go down, you don't have a whole team. So you've got to fix them yourself, or somebody's got to fix them. And this youngish woman, she's about early 30s, got a reputation as a Christian for fixing the computers by prayer. So she'd go and fiddle, and if nothing happens, she'd just pray for them, and they get better. And then one day, she's in the canteen. Somebody in the canteen puts their 50p or a pound or whatever it is to get a can of Coke or something out of the vending machine, and it doesn't come out. So they said, go and get Tracy and, get her to pray for it. And so somebody comes and, Tracy, you need to get this can of Coke out of the vending machine. And she thinks, you're winding me up here, aren't you? So she goes anyway. So, are you winding me up? And they say, no, we're not winding up. So she kicks the machine, and the thing doesn't come out. And then she prays, and it comes out. So then something serious happens, which is that they can't open the safe. And there are keys inside the safe that they need to operate the hotel that evening. There are places they need to get to with those keys, and they can't open it. The code is not working. So they go and get Tracy, and it's not her name, but they go and get Tracy. And then she says, are you winding me up again? No, we're not winding you up. It's not opening. So she tries the code, and then she tries it again, and it doesn't work, and then she prays, and it clicks open. Make a lot of money with that skill, couldn't you? Anyway, the upshot of this is because it's the safe, it has to go into the incident book of Hilton hotels. And it has to be read out at the weekly staff meeting. So there's a new person coming on the staff, and it reads, any incidents this week? Yes, safe would not open. Tracy prayed, safe opened. Imagine being in a place where non-Christians came and asked you to fix their problems by prayer. Now, you have to build yourself up to that. And it's not a gift that everybody has, but I just think, do we have an imagination to recognize that actually God could help us with anything? Anything.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, let's just give a huge thank you to Mark for coming to us.
Thank you very much.